Hello from Gardening at Douentza here in Ireland, and you're very welcome to this late November garden tour. So it's been really mild here in Ireland this autumn, with the result that many plants are holding on to their leaves and haven't rotted away yet. And well, it's a bit strange, but we have the likes of Tetrapanax rex here that still is holding on to its leaves. Now winter is a wonderful time when plants really get on with what they do best, which is producing roots that make them grow strong, and next year they'll bound back with great strength and great beauty and great vigour. And we need to give them that time to rest. We all need a rest, I guess. So today what we're going to do is we're going to take a little trip around the garden, have a look at what's looking good and just what jobs I've been up to, and maybe you'll let me know down below what you've been up to in your garden this autumn. Okay, come on, let's go. Now we're going to go over to this section of the garden, the west garden, because there's a couple of plants looking good in here at the moment. And these bare twigs are my mock orange bushes, which were pruned at the end of the summer, and they have lots of bare earth at their feet because that's where I've planted a glut of orange tulips that are going to brighten up this section of the garden in early summer or late spring. And this plant here, this glorious tree, is Melianthus major, a stalwart in my garden that looks fabulous all through the winter. Now it's one that dies back when the frost hits it, and so usually what happens by springtime there's not a lot to see except just withered leaves, and I have to cut it back and it starts again from scratch. It's a plant that gives a very tropical, exotic feel, certainly for my part of the world, and one that carries its weight just from the foliage alone. Now this can flower for you in early spring, and I've seen it flower in many gardens here in Ireland, but mine hasn't yet done so. The frost has always caught it at the last moment. And just over here to the left of the Melianthus major, there's a very great bare space in the border, as you can see, and that's where I've planted a whole wad of the new tulips I bought, so we can expect orange lily flowered tulips here in spring. And over here we have one of my Scheffleras. This is the one that's called rhododendrifolia, presumably because its leaves look like rhododendrons, but I really don't think so. In any case, it's quite a hardy tree slash shrub, and it's doing really well in my garden since I bought it several years ago. It has these very characteristic red stems that a lot of Scheffleras tend to share. And because it's been so mild, we have anomalies like these snapdragons called Madame Bufferfly, my absolute favourite one. But it's still going, it's still flowering, and this despite it being kind of late November at this stage, but we haven't had any frost. And all my tenders have been lifted now at this stage. This bed usually houses a lot of aeoniums in summer, and they're all tucked away in the greenhouse. This sedum is looking really good in all its fine detail. And I've left the house leeks on the right in place because they're really quite hardy. The Euphorbia on the left, I don't know its name, but it has proved really hardy for me, and that's been outdoors for many years. And for those of you who were interested in my plight with the box blight, it seems that I have managed to save them. And although these were cut quite hard back, they're growing well now and there seems to be no sign of the blight. So fingers crossed. And just over here, the sedums that I divided this spring have done so well, and they've responded by standing upright. And that's the thing with sedums, when they get too big and too clumpy they tend to flop over, so dividing is the key. So dividing them is the key, and they've repaid me by standing upright, which is a great thing. And the long border has been mostly cut back, whatever can be cut back. And that's because I wanted to plant tulips in here. So I have a lot of tulips in here. Again, the orange ones, and these are going to look amazing in spring. And many perennials are holding on to their leaves because it has been so very mild, like this glorious Podophyllum. And I love Podophyllums. I love their enormous, enormous leaves. In autumn, myself and my husband did some pruning of trees, and normally pruning of trees happens in winter, but we did this in October, and the reason for that is we addressed the bleeder trees, which are ones like this Liquidambar here on the left, ones that tend to bleed sap if you cut into them. And of course that leaves the tree open to infection, so it's something best avoided. And if you prune bleeder trees like Liquidambar and certain pine trees, then you can avoid this if you do it in October. And I'm very pleased with the overall result having pruned this tree. Looks a bit brutal now, but you can see that the shape is starting to come out and to be more pronounced. But look down there, can you see that fuchsia, pink fuchsia just nodding in the distance? Let's go and have a look. These things are so sweet. And when you were a kid, did you ever say it was a little lady? Of course, for that to happen you need to make sure she only has 2 legs. Okay, one of them's longer than the other, but there she is. Can you believe we still have visibly blue heads on the hydrangeas? They've not turned brown with the weather, and in the background there you can see that the rhododendron is budding up nicely for next year. And many things look really nice when the sun catches them, like that yellow bamboo there on the right, or the Chionochloa rubra, which is the New Zealand tussock grass there on the left, grown from seed many moons ago. Light is just such a wonderful thing at this time of year. The quality of the light is quite special. One of my favourite hydrangeas is the oak leaf hydrangea, this one here, and it really comes into its own at this time of year as the leaves get a kind of reddish bronze tint to them. And of course barks come into their own at this time of year. Trees with attractive bark like this gorgeous Acer griseum. And T-Rex or Tetrapanax has of course still got its leaves. It's kind of semi-evergreen in my garden, and in a harsh winter it will lose the canopy, but normally it'll persist. And it always has dead leaves, however, so it's a good opportunity to just remove them and stop them falling down and covering up everything else below. When I was planting tulips in this border here not very long ago, I was wondering what the glorious scent was that came to me in wafts, and I was looking around and it was such a spring-like smell, really quite unbelievable for this time of year. And I eventually tracked it down to this beautiful shrub that is in flower and is still in full flower, and it gives off such a fresh spring scent that it just lifts the spirits. And the phormium that I moved, was it last winter? It just looks like it's always been here. Such a fantastic plant, and it was completely wasted where it was in the garden. Now my experience of phormiums in the past is that they're an absolute brute to move, but this one came up quite easily and moved, and it's just doing a great job of filling in that gap between the two trees. And here we have a nice little cluster of mostly evergreen plants. So we have the Luma on the right, which has an amazing peeling bark in time, but at the moment we're enjoying the variegated leaves. We have an Echium in the middle, which will go on to great things next year, hopefully flower, and a nice grass on the left that just adds that little dot of movement. It is late November, so most of the autumn colour on trees has gone. However, there are a few stragglers, like this Liquidambar, and this one is called Theo. It's a cultivar named Theo, and it has such beautiful, beautiful leaves. And of course, it's important to pick up leaves from places where people are likely to slip on them, like the stone circle here where our table is. This gets absolutely lethal from the Tetrapanax leaves if you just leave them fall all through the winter, and very, very slippy. So I like to pick these up as I walk around the garden. And collecting leaves to make leaf mould is a very worthy job to do at this time of year. I don't do enough of it, although I start out with great intentions always in autumn and fill up lots of bags and do the whole thing, and then kind of run out of steam. But it's great to have leaf mould for potting and for just mulching your borders. A wonderful asset for any garden. And I mentioned pruning. The pine tree that you see in front of you here also got pruned, and I think it just opens up the garden so much more, just letting views come forward. I'm really quite pleased with how that pine has turned out, having raised its skirts a good bit. And look out for the little things too, such as this gorgeous cyclamen with its silver leaf just hanging out here underneath the withered leaves of this small Acer tree, and when the canopy disappears just opens up views and helps us catch glimpses of things that we mightn't otherwise have noticed. And of course autumn is a time of browns. The beech hedging has finished showing its gorgeous autumn colours, and now we just have the dead marcescent leaves. So beech holds on to its dead leaves. Nobody really knows why it does that. Perhaps to just drop them in spring and give the young plants a nice mulch to help them get going, because it tends to be young plants that do this. I'm not sure I really like the look of those marcescent leaves being all brown and like an awful like that all through the winter. But today with the sunshine behind it, it really is not bad at all. And this is my favourite palm tree in the garden, and it's my favourite because it's hardy. It's called Trachycarpus fortunei, and you can see that I have quite a large specimen here which has done really well in the garden over time. Sometimes it even flowers. And many of you who've watched my garden tour videos will remember how I waged war on Fatsia japonica earlier on in the year. But I'm really loving how this variegated one is looking in the border, and the cream coloured flowers just look so good. It will need a good cut back in spring because it's completely shading out some nice plants down below. And this is my pot tidy where I keep my empty pots. Kasky seems to like it. And that about brings me to the end of this garden visit, which I hope you enjoyed. Hope you're getting out and, if not working in your own garden, at least enjoying it, because when we get those bright days, they really are to be grabbed with both hands. Okay, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Bye.